And I just want to verify everyone can see the agenda on my screen. Yeah, good to go. Cool. Thank you, Deborah. I think we can take attendance with the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Commissioner, you're muted, I think.
Do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay. Oh, I've got 9:30. So tell me when you're ready and I'll call the meeting to order.
All right, I'm going to unmute a few folks. Gil and Craig, you both are called in. So if you need to speak, just raise your hand. We'll make sure you get unmuted. I think we're ready to go.
All right. Well, good morning. And let's call this meeting to order of the Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board. It's Friday, October 23rd. I've been informed, before we get to public comment, I guess let's call the roll.
Commissioner Smith,
Here.
Gloria Mills, Glenn Brown, Craig Purcell,
I see Craig in the attendees list.
David Newell, Emily Hugart,
Here.
Christina Melling, Mark Harshberger, Nancy Castellano, Dr. Leslie Gordon, Councilman Schisler,
Here.
Don Pelkey,
Here.
Nancy Pacifico, Cassandra Blaylock,
Here.
Jody Toner, Artie Fryer,
Here.
and Deborah Knoll.
Here.
Do we have a quorum?
8 present, but
Dr. Leslie Gordon was just joined. And then did you get Craig and Gil?
I did. We do have a quorum now.
Great, thank you. And I've been informed we had no public comment signed up. Nobody signed up to speak for public comment, so that takes us to the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion to approve the minutes from August 21st.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Schisler. And do I have a second?
Second.
Who is that?
Artie Fryer.
Great. I have a motion to approve by Mr. Schisler and seconded by Mr. Fryer. Let's take a roll call. Do we take a roll call vote for these, Mr. Barber?
I think we can just do aye. If there's any
Okay.
objection.
All right. All approved, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? the record show the minutes are approved unanimously. And that brings us to action items. The first one is the CTC annual operating report by Ms. Smith with the Sunshine Line. You're recognized, Ms. Smith.
Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Wonderful.
She's muted.
Sorry, I unmuted myself. Sorry about that. Apparently we all do it. So, too many buttons. On a Friday morning at that. Good morning. So Josh, you're gonna move the slides for me, right?
Correct.
Yeah, the annual operating report is a requirement that each CTC does every year and submits to the state, and then the TD Commission accumulates the report for a statewide report. You can move to the next one. You should all have a copy of the actual report in your agenda. If you did not open the second version of the agenda that got sent out, the first one had some pages missing, so make sure if you look for the whole report, you look in the second copy of the agenda. It's, like I said, it's a report that it accumulates everything, the TD services that are provided in Hillsborough County, the ones that Sunshine Line does, the HART paratransit trips are included in there, and the coordination contracts that come to this board periodically, it includes the trips that they do. It's a July through June report. There are 13 of those coordination contract agencies. I always try to point out it does not include Medicaid, non-emergency transportation, which is also a big component of services for that population, but it's not reflected in this report. So just remember those trips are also provided out there. If you can go to the next one. It's used for a few things that will change next year. Like I said, they accumulated into a statewide report to compare, county to county and CTC to CTC to see what's going on. They use it to provide information back to the legislature on transportation disadvantaged services and obviously to help justify funding the program continuing. It's used right now to determine how much transportation disadvantaged funds are distributed out to each CTC. The proposal, that formula is being revisited by the state. They've had a series of workshops and they're now doing the rule change meetings. They're currently recommending no longer using this report as one of the components in that formula. They are proposing changing to only using the trips. Right now it uses, so every trip that's provided, regardless of who funds it, is rolled into that formula. Their proposal next year will be just to use the trips that are provided through that grant in that formula, which, it is what it is, but it will mean that trips that are funded by things other than the TD grant, while they're great for the community, will not necessarily help to get more state funding for more service after they change the formula. And it's used, a lot of the numbers are used in our evaluation, which Josh will be bringing back to the board in December. You can go to the next one. This year, obviously, there are going to be a lot of service impacts from COVID-19, although the 2021 will have more of those impacts because it's a July through June reporting year. So we really had April, May, and June impacted. So 9 months of the year were relatively normal, and then we had the impact. So the total number of people served by the Transportation Disadvantaged Program, not just Sunshine Line, were almost 29,000 people, and that's relatively consistent with last year. But I think that's largely partly because we served 9 months of normal service, and partly because we even saw in those last 3 months, the people who were dependent on us for transportation still went. They took less trips, but they were still our clients. Door-to-door trips this reporting year were 471,000. That was down 115,000 trips, and mostly in that last quarter. A lot of the agencies that are coordination contract agencies, they have group homes and things where the people really didn't, they stopped going to their day treatment programs. All the group trips stopped for aging services, so that's where that drop happened. The bus passes that are distributed countywide are mostly Sunshine Line. There are very few from some of the agencies. 16,960 bus passes. That's close to what was last year also. 182,000 trips according to the state's estimate. The state estimates bus passes as a one-day pass is one trip, which we know is really at least 2 trips. And a 31-day pass is 12 trips. We know that it's really much more than that. So we really estimate that the actual trips provided through the bus pass program is closer to 484,000. But that and the bus pass riders continued to go during, the real lockdown periods and even after. It's less than last year, but they're dependent on riding transit, so they're still needing bus passes to get to their essential trips. You can go to the next one. Trip purpose, just then remember this is overall, not just Sunshine Line, so it'll look a little different than if we did it, say, in the evaluation where it's just Sunshine Line. I was curious to see how much, if it changed very much because of the pandemic. The grocery trips went up 20% from last year to this year. So while it stayed about 23% of the trips, last year we only did 146,000 food trips. So, and nutrition will count the aging services program trips going to nutrition centers, or we're counting grocery trips in that category. But interestingly, although a lot of things went down, grocery trips went up. Medical trips decreased significantly from 167,000 to 147,000, and that makes sense because a lot of non-urgent medical trips got postponed. I have a feeling they probably got caught up in July, August, and September, or hopefully they did if it was medical care people actually needed. Now prescription pickups get counted in the medical trips, so it may be that some people no longer had to go pick up prescriptions, so some of that is going to be from that. But medical went up and grocery went down. The employment trips went down from 163,000 last year to 136,000 this year. So that's also some education. So I'm hoping that it was the training trips that went down more than the actual employment trips, because we did continue, and I think everyone did. I mean, I know HART did, HART Paratransit did. I mean, we were all continuing to provide. If you had a job, we were still taking you, that was an essential trip. So if people weren't going, it was because they didn't have a place to go, not because transportation for them stopped. And other trips would be the category that we really should be expecting to go down. And that went down significantly from 189,000 to 149,000. So that's where the biggest drop was in those trips that it makes sense. They're not medical, they're not food, they would be the less essential trips. And like I said, I'm expecting all that to go down again, obviously for this year. So we're only doing about a third of what we normally do. So spreading them out, so you're still using a lot of resources to do it, but you can go to the next one. Okay. The resources that we use to provide all that service, like I said, it's Sunshine Line, HART, and 13 other agencies. 307 vehicles spread out the county. That does not include HART's big buses. It's just the ones for paratransit. And that's about the same as last year. Almost 4 million miles. That is down about 5% from last year, which makes sense because we were doing less trips. Miles won't go down in the same ratio as trips because we're still traveling with the whole county. Even if you're only taking, a couple people here and there, we may still be going almost as far. There are 831 drivers included in the report, and that's largely a reflection of the coordination contract agencies that have a lot of people who sometimes drive. So the ones, Sunshine Line and Hart, who have dedicated drivers, there are not as many of the smaller agencies that have dedicated full-time drivers. So it's a lot of drivers because a lot of people drive as a small part of their job. The resources to provide all that service are it's just over $21 million. I always want to point out 10 million of that is local funds. It's either tax funding, fares, local non-government. Some of the agencies get a lot of donation or private funding that's local. So, you know, as a community, we're really putting into this service, which is a good thing. The average cost per trip for this reporting period was $32.19, and that's a straight average. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily say that's how much a door-to-door trip costs versus a bus trip, and that's up 23%, but that's because of the pandemic in that last quarter. You can go to the next one. Like I said, the whole report is in your agenda package. If you had any specific questions, I can see if I can address them today, or I can bring it back to the next meeting. But otherwise, we just need a motion certifying that the board has reviewed the report and that the Planning Commission has received it, so that we can document that to the state.
This is Gil Schusser. I'll move to adopt the report as written for presentation.
Thank you. I've got a motion to approve from Mr. Schisler. Councilman Schisler, sorry, it's early. Do I have
This is Artie Fryer. I second.
Thank you. Second by R.D. Fryer. Are there any questions or comments? Do I see, am I able to see people's hands raised here? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't, Madam Chair.
Yeah. If you have questions or comments, you know, feel free to just speak up and we'll deal with it, or you can put something in the chat saying, I'll keep an eye on the chat box and try to call on people if there was a lot of requests. But seeing no.
I do have a question. This is
Yes,
Artie Fryer.
Yes, sir.
For Karen. I'm just concerned because of, you know, the crisis and the issues. Do you anticipate any reduction in funding?
We haven't yet. You know, that's always a concern, I think, with, you know, that we're dependent on, you know, property tax funding, or although house sales, I guess, are all right. But we haven't been told to expect reductions in funding, although, I mean, in the current year, we're not receiving funding from the aging services because we're not providing those trips. So while that funding hasn't gone away, we won't be receiving it until we start doing, other than the small number of meal delivery trips we're doing for them.
Right.
That funding, like I said, while it's available, the service isn't being provided. So that will have an impact this year. I think last year they had already drawn down the full amount of their grant, so it really didn't affect, it didn't hit so much. But this year that will likely be something to consider, unless we get partway through the year and we are able to start those programs and draw down the full funding. You know, it just depends how things go.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we've got a motion by Councilman Schisler, second by Mr. Fry. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Show that passed unanimously. And thank you very much, Ms. Smith. That was a very interesting report for me. Interesting to understand how COVID is impacting the cost per trip, the trips taken. I see that everybody is grocery shopping a little more while we're eating at home and eating at home more. and eating out less. So it's very important information, and thank you for doing such a good job presenting it clearly and concisely.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
may I ask a question?
yes, please. Mr.
This is Gil Schilsler calling, speaking. Yeah, being a representative to this via Hart from Temple Terrace, I found the information very, very interesting and really the kind of stuff we need to share with a lot of people. Nope, I never knew about this until just recently, having been, associated with Hart through to this committee. We need to tell people what we're doing. And personally, I would like, if this information, if we have any kind of press releases or anything, make sure that I get it so that I can tell my citizens in Temple Terrace, my constituents, what's going on and all the work that we are doing and that you guys, that you're getting done and the good benefit that it is helping the neighborhood, because I'm sure there's Temple Terrace residents who are participating. And I don't know, it's just, I was shocked. I really had no idea to the depth and breadth that you guys are operating, and I appreciate it. And it was an excellent report, and I would truly like to see more information like this so that we can disseminate it through the area, through our social media, through the city. There's a lot of people who should know the kind of stuff that's going on with this board. I'll stop there. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman Schistler. I totally agree that we have a lot to be proud of here. And, I'm really proud to be a small part of it, but there's a lot of good being done in this end by our county. And if there's no other comments or questions, we can move to the next item, Plant City Transit Plan. Ms. Rahman, you're
I'm
recognized.
here. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear and see me well?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, others. Josh, can we move to the next slide? Today, I will be presenting the Plant City Transit Study plan. We started the study in January, and we have kind of come to the final stages of the study. So here I'm presenting to you the updates, what we have done so far. I will just give you an overview of the study so that you get an idea of what it is. Next slide, please. Just to give you a background, the study area is in the map as in the figure here. Plant City has over 40,000 residents and growing fast. It's one of the fastest growing areas. Next slide, please. The study purpose and outcome is just something I want to tell you about. The main goal of the study is to explore the transit operations in Plant City. We are trying to evaluate two different kinds of transit to serve. One is to serve downtown Tampa, and one is a circulator within Plant City. And this will be estimated based on the cost and potential ridership, what we are expecting. The goal of the study was to identify these future areas where the projected growth would be there, so to better serve the people. Next slide, please. This is just a project schedule. As I explained before, the study started in January, and here we are in October-November timeframe, and I'm giving the presentations to the board in December or November. Following this, we will come up with a transit study report, and that will help you. I will provide that later. Next slide. Next slide, please. Plant City had two types of services before. One was a local commuter, which was operated from 2005 to 8. It had highest ridership around 47,000 at one time. Next slide, please. There was also another kind of transit service, which was a 28 East County Express, which was run by Hart, and it operated from 2010 to 2017. At around 2017, Hart had to stop the service because of the low ridership and also because of their Mission Max comprehensive operation plan. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, this is just a update for the population and employment, because we looked at the existing conditions to better understand what is currently available and what can be served in the future. So as I mentioned before, Plant City has around 40,000 residents now, and it's growing to almost double by in the next 25 years. There are currently about 17,000 jobs, and the major corridors are some of this listed here. The biggest employers is the South Florida Baptist Hospital, which is located around the downtown. And the map shows that the downtown areas are the most populated and the most employment density areas. Next slide, please. The study team also analyzed the commute patterns and zero-car households, which was pretty consistent with what we expected. The downtown and the core areas had the map shows that the darker areas are the ones which had more households with no car, and they would be most benefited by a transit. Next slide, please. Currently, there is no other transit service other than the ones which I previously explained were only existing in the past. There is only Sunshine Line which provides service, and the map here represents that the areas which are the origins and the destinations, and some of the areas are listed, which are the community center, medical appointments, grocery. So these are the places where people would most need a transit service. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This section is what we did for the, after analyzing the existing conditions and the market analysis, we did a transit alternatives analysis. And the goals were as follows, depending on the, based on the multiple stakeholder meetings we had, to implement useful and reliable service, especially to serve the communities of concern and persons with disabilities. Use transit as an incentive to downtown development and to connect Plant City to Tampa, and also possibly to Lakeland in the future. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The first section is the circulator analysis. Like I mentioned earlier, there were two types of services what we wanted to explore. And the first one is a circulator, which would provide a service within Plant City. The following assumptions were made for calculation purposes for the cost estimates, that each bus would have a $600,000 capital cost and an additional 12% paratransit cost. The hours of operation would be every day from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Next slide, please. Sorry, I had to rush through this, but just if there's any questions, you can pause and ask me, or we can take questions at the end. The first option for the circulator is given in the map, which we analyzed a trip from downtown, going west to Strawberry Festival grounds and coming back and looping all the way down to Redmond Parkway to the Walmart shopping center, and then coming back to the downtown. It would be operated by one bus and a round trip of 10.7 miles with a 50-minute round trip frequency. Next slide, please. The costs for the operation are, like I said before, the operating cost is $100K because it's one bus, an additional 12%, and it would serve about 10,000 people with almost 5,000 jobs. Next slide, please. The second option is very similar to the first option, what we analyzed, but instead of the one bus, we were splitting that trip into two different trips, and they would be both connected via a stop in downtown. The map here shows this is what we pulled out from using the HART's route analysis tool, and it is two routes. Next slide, please. I will explain each one in detail. Next slide. Thank you. So the first option option B, route 1, is the one which connects the west part of the downtown along Collins Street, Strawberry Festival ground. It takes a jog at Walter Street down to Alexander Street, Grand Street, and back to the downtown. This was developed based on public feedback what we received were some of the popular routes, and it would be operated every 30 minutes with the 26 minutes round trip and about 6.5 miles. Next slide, please. The cost for this is again a $600 to $650K basic cost plus a 12% paratransit cost. Because this connects some of the residential areas also, it serves more people, about 12,000 and more jobs. Next slide, please. The second option is the part 2 of that, which connects from downtown all the way. It comes on Redmond Parkway, similarly takes a jog around Walmart and also connects to some of the residential areas along Alsobrook, Maryland, and Baker Street. It operates every 30 minutes and almost a 7-mile round trip. Next slide, please. And again, the operating costs are given as follows, that about 600K, another 12%. It serves more than 10,000 people and gives access to almost 4,000 jobs within this operational area. Next slide, please. So this is how we compared the costs for both the options. The option A is the one bus. Option B is a combination of both these routes I explained a bit above. And they both will connect to other routes, which is the limited stop. And if you can notice that the first option has serves less people, and the second option serves more people because it's more intricate route, but it's also a longer route operated by 2 buses. So the costs will be slightly more. Next slide, please. Apart from both these circulator options, we also evaluated another on-demand service because we saw that there was some interest based on the stakeholder meetings initially. So for comparison purposes, we used Tampa's Downtowner as the cost. If you can, so some of the matrices we pulled from there are approximately $1.6 million per year to operate 6 vehicles in downtown Tampa. Currently, this service is provided by a grant that FDOT received, so it's funded by FDOT. And if you can see that there are about 14,000 passengers per month, and the cost, which is about $5 a trip per passenger, is actually borne by HART. It's not a passenger, I mean, it's a passenger cost, but not borne by the user. It is an app-based service, and people can call it using a phone app. Next slide, please. So for comparison purposes, we use the size of the downtown. The map shows that the map on this picture shows that this is the size of the downtown or what is currently operated. It's about 1 square miles. Next slide, please. And again, this is how we overlaid it with the Plant Cities map. If you notice that the downtown of Plant City is not as densely populated as Tampa, so it will serve a larger area, but the amount of people served might be lesser. This will have to be evaluated in detail more, but anything more than that would increase the cost for the ridership. Next slide, please. The second set of options what we evaluated were for the limited stop alternatives to connect from Plant City downtown to Tampa. Next slide, please. Again, the assumptions we used are very similar to the above options, and it's about 600K. It operates Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. and a weekend operation of 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Next slide, please. The first option what we evaluated was something what I previously mentioned, the Route 28X, what was operated in the past. So this is the exact same route, and it operates like a park and ride service. So it doesn't come to downtown core. It stops at one of the Mount Zion Assembly of God outside of the city. From there, it connects via Brandon, State Road 60 via Selman Expressway to downtown Tampa. Next slide, please. Sorry. The annual operating cost would be roughly about $950 to $1.2 million. The distance traveled, because I mentioned about that, it's a longer route, so it's about 53 miles. But the number of people served is almost 45,000 with over 104,000 access to over 100,000 jobs. And it's operated by 2 buses. Next slide, please. The second option what we evaluated is an option which operates along I-4. So it connects to downtown Plant City. From there, it goes on I-4, stops at Net Park, which is another transfer hub for HART. From there, people could access University of Tampa, Temple Terrace area, and it comes to downtown Tampa. Next slide, please. The annual operating cost for this is also roughly the same as above, as the previous one, and about a distance traveled of about 50 miles. It serves more than 15,000 people, and gives access to about 77,000 jobs. Next slide, please. The third option was also, all these options were developed based on feedback at some of the stakeholder meetings. So this stop actually also connects from downtown downtown Plant City via Mango. There is another HART. This is one of the other major HART hubs also. And from there, it goes along 50th Street to connect to downtown Tampa. Next slide, please. The annual operating cost is slightly less than the previous options, but the distance is also less. It's about 46 miles, and it gives it serves lesser people with over lesser jobs. So about 20,000 people and about 70,000 jobs. Next slide, please. The fourth option is a route extension from the currently existing Route 38, which stops at Mango Walmart. So this proposal, we are only looking at the additional cost for extending that route to Plant City. It's a much shorter route, and the operating cost is also less, but it serves much lesser people, and the jobs is also much lesser. Next slide, please. The fifth option was a Plant City. It is one of the combination of some of the previous routes with a stop at Net Park, Mango Walmart, and from there to Plant City. It connects to two major hubs, so there are more connections here. Next slide, please. The operating cost is around $1 million, and it serves 20,000 people with over 70, almost close to 80,000 jobs. And it is served by two buses, but it has more connection options. Next slide, please. So this is all that is the core of the study, which is all the 5 costs compared side by side. As you can see here, some of the routes are longer, but serves more people, and the cost is also much more. So this is what Plant City and HART would have to evaluate to know what the costs are. I know the number is detailed. So if we can take any questions after that, we can come back to this, but otherwise we will move to the next slide. Apart from all the options to connect to Tampa, we also evaluated an option to Lakeland because most of the stakeholders in Plant City who attended the meeting also wanted to complete a trip to Lakeland so that it completes the connection from Tampa to Lakeland. So we just evaluated a route along along Reynolds Street, Baker Street via US 92 with a stop at, if you can see here in the map that is provided, that there is a stop at the Amazon Fulfillment Center along County Line Road. From there, it stops at Lakeland, which is the current connection for Citrus connection. Next slide, please. And the operating cost for this is very less. It's about $500K. And it's a distance traveled of 25 miles and serves about 5,000 people and access to about 8,000 jobs. Next slide, please. After we evaluated all this, throughout the study, we had many stakeholder meetings and outreach efforts. Next slide, please. In the beginning of the meeting, in the beginning of the study, we had an initial stakeholder focus group meeting where we identified all the stakeholders through different various contacts, and they were together, where they were with us throughout the study. It helped to identify the key corridors and destinations for some of the future growth. Some of the options what I explained above came out of the study. We also discussed on the benefits and challenges. The second stakeholder meeting had to be a virtual format due to the COVID-19 situation, and we had about, it was well attended by almost 30 stakeholders, and which is what led to all these options development. Following the presentation in May, we had a survey sent to the focus group and also to the public. We had a very good response, and we reached over 120 people. Next slide, please. The later part of the study had a public open house. Again, this was a virtual open house due to the COVID-19 situation. We developed a website which was almost replicating an actual open house. If you can see on the map, on the screenshot of the website is what I have provided to show that each alternative or each option and each main topic was divided into multiple tabs, and people could go from one room to another. It was a virtual room. Look at the study presentation and the highlights of what that section covered, and also an opportunity to give feedback. There was also a live presentation to the public to help them understand what that study is about. Apart from that, they could always come back to this website, which is open for almost 3 weeks to collect surveys. Next slide, please. The surveys, the responses, and the feedbacks was what all led to the development of the alternatives. It was seen that most of the people love to have transit, and they found that it was a good opportunity for tourism, for jobs, and for access, especially for people with disabilities and disadvantaged population. The challenge, however, would be to have a reliable service and also the coverage of the areas. Some of them wanted more coverage, and all these were taken as feedbacks. Most of the all the commuters drove to work, so they really needed transit, but they also needed a good transit hub for pickups and drop-off, and also to connect the various services and easy access to the transit stops. Most of the options I mentioned above were the frequent trips needed to along the shopping, the grocery, the doctor's offices, and the around the areas around the hospital. To Tampa, some of the most desirable places what people mentioned were the Tampa downtown for jobs, at Tampa International Airport, USF area, Brandon area, and Lakeland was also one of the more popular feedback what we got from the people. So with this, I move on to the recommendation. Next slide, please. The recommended action for you would be to approve the study, and please send it to the MPO board for approval. And I just would want to mention that the report is currently, we are working on the report. We just did an early presentation. So once the report is done, we have a website. I can send it to you. I can send it through Josh, and you will get an opportunity to review the report also. I can take any questions here.
Yes, this is Dr. Gordon. I have a question.
You recognize Dr. Gordon?
Okay, so how many people attended the virtual town hall? What percentage of the population?
So unfortunately for the virtual town hall, it was a very, we had a limited notice time. So we had almost like 12 to 14 attendees, but the stakeholder meeting was what we had before. That was also a virtual meeting, and that was well attended. The virtual town hall or the open house was attended by public, but we also sent the survey to various organizations. Through the stakeholders, we reached out to their groups. So the service was also sent out to a larger group, but the actual presentation was only attended by around 12 to 14 people.
Okay, yeah, I know the challenges of sometimes getting people to attend things like town hall and respond to things like this, but it is a real concern because sometimes you wonder if you're truly getting the opinions of the people who matter and who will actually use the services, you know, so that's a concern. So tell me, there's a little part of this process that I'm not clear on. Did you finally come up with a recommendation related to which route would be selected?
No, actually, that was not the action. I mean, the summary was to provide a list of alternatives, and since we are the agency who only is doing the study and the cost estimates, further talks would have to be required between Plan City and HART, and they would have to make a decision based on the best proposal and the best route they can provide. Because, like I mentioned in some of the slides, there were various routes we analyzed. And the costs were shown. So the cost comparison is the gist of the study. The actual route planning would have to be something done by HART in consultation with Plan City.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? Let me ask you what this recommended action means. If this committee approves the study, what does the recommendation part mean to the MPO board? Are we simply recommending that, okay, the study as is ready for review, or are we saying, you know, we recommend beginning to, you know, work on these routes more?
So, ma'am, to answer that question, I believe the goal of this study was to approve the study as a whole, and we are actually going to be presenting to the Plan City Commission and the Planning Board, and also we are going to be presenting to HART Board. So they would be the guiding authorities for making that call. But I am not sure about. I am not sure about answering that question further than that. Sorry about
Ms.
that.
Holden, I see you've come on visually. Did you have a thought on what this recommendation means from us?
Sure. Thank you so much, Beth Alden, Director of the MPO. And so we know when we bring the report ultimately to the MPO board, and that'll be probably at our December meeting, so that there's more time for review of the report. The action will probably be to accept the report and to transmit it to HART and Plant City officially for consideration. So this is a study that was requested by Plant City so that they would understand better what some of the service options their population might like and what those might cost, so that they can work with HART to see what they can put in place. But this really is for information for those two organizations to consider their next steps.
And ultimately, since Plant City doesn't participate in funding HART, this would presumably lead to discussions about whether they want to change and join the rest of us in that funding responsibility, right?
Yes, so good point. That is something that they could consider doing, and it would of course help them to have cost estimates and concrete service concepts if they are going to have that conversation with their residents.
Thank you. And thank you for this study. I was really impressed by the percentage of potential minority riders or potential riders that are minorities that are within a half a mile of these routes. Getting up between 55 and 62% minority population within half a mile of the routes is an admirable goal to consider, right? And the percent of people within in poverty levels within a half a mile. I would like, when this goes to MPO, to understand a little bit more the answers to the question that Ms. Gordon was asking, about the participation in the stakeholder meetings, and that's Dr. Gordon, sorry, and understand sometimes in stakeholder meetings that I participated in, there's maybe business interests, developer interests, kind of outweighing landowner interests, outweighing the actual people who might be writing or availing themselves of the service. And so I would like to understand whether we're getting a large percentage of citizen participation along with any special interests.
So thank you for that question, Commissioner. Like I mentioned earlier, the stakeholder participation was mostly government representatives, city representatives from Plant City. We had representatives from the hospital, university, the HCC campus, and a couple of other various organizations who helped us to frame the study. But at the same time, there could have been two reasons why the response from the citizens were very less. First, I did get personal calls because we had the numbers listed and the email, the website, everything listed. I had personal calls from citizens who did not unfortunately have access to computers or smartphones to even take the survey. So one of the ladies who had much difficulty just an example that one of the callers had very much difficulty even watching the survey, viewing the survey from her phone. So I had to personally fill in the survey for her. This is actually a challenge for not just for the survey takers, but also for them. Even there were citizens who called me with their personal sorrow that it was so difficult for them to get from one location to another if they don't have a car. So I do get it that that could have been some of the reasons why we had little less participation than what was expected. But also on the flip side, the stakeholder survey reached through them. Like I had Sunshine Line, so through them we did try to get to their riders for taking their survey, and that must have been a reason how we got such a big response at the stakeholder meeting. So we did try to frame it in such a way that the stakeholder survey, there were two surveys. So the first survey was what was really the gist of all the options. I mean, that was what led to the alternatives, and we found that that was a very thorough survey with a good chunk of response. We did get a lot of good responses from them, which helped us to frame the study. So if that helps at all.
Great, thank you. So
thank you so much. Thank you to Beth also for answering that question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, both of you, for helping us understand this. Seems like a very in-depth study, and a lot to think about here. Are there any other questions or comments for about this Plant City Transit study? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve moving it forward to the MPO board?
So moved, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Second? Is there a second?
Yes, Deborah Noel, APD.
Thank you. Motion by Dr. Gordon, second by Ms. Newell. And let's just say all approved, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimously to move that to the MPO board. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Bye.
And I think our presenter for the next status report is not yet here, Mr. Bugle. Is that right, Mr. Barber?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll move on to status report B to review the last year's legislative positions and suggest new ones. Is that you, Ms. Alden?
Sure, I will speak to that if that's all right. Joshua, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of, yeah, I see that you've got that agenda item pulled up, so that's perfect. So what we're talking about today is legislative positions that our MPO board and our TD board have taken in the last year to 2 years. We're just discussing that today and kind of doing a roundup of topics that you might like us to bring to our legislative delegation so that they're aware as they go into the next session. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of topics. We have in your packet a letter from last year that came from our board. A couple of things are out of date now. The first bullet was that we asked for funding for the reconstruction of the major interchange in the West Shore area. That funding did get allocated. The second bullet point talks about citizen participation in key decisions. This has been an issue that has come up several times with the legislature. It's possible that this could come up again. So there have been legislative proposals that would affect how our MPO board is structured, who sits on it, whether that's a regional board or one specifically for Hillsborough County. There have also been proposals that would restrict our ability to raise funds for transportation with the Charter County and Regional Transportation System surtax and with other funding sources. So this is something that you know, our board has taken a position about in the past, that citizens here in our county should be able to make decisions about their own future. Our third bullet point in this letter was about improving safety on our roads. So there have been a couple of things that came up over the last couple of years, including enforcing existing laws about cell phone use. We do think that there is an opportunity. The legislature took action on that this past year, but we think that there is an opportunity potentially to strengthen what they did. And so we'd suggest leaving that bullet in place. Regulation of motorized scooters was taken up. There's been a decision that scooters will be allowed on our roadways. Penalties for injuring pedestrians, penalties for repeat drag racing. Those have both been suggested. They haven't really gotten any traction in the past, but they're definitely ideas that we can bring forward. There was a big push last year to restrict local government's ability to use rapid flashing beacons to alert drivers about crosswalks. There was called Sophie's Law, and it was filed because of a young girl who was killed in a crosswalk when she had turned on the rapid flashing beacon. And so the law would basically have restricted local governments from being able to use those rapid flashing beacons in the future, would have required that there be a stop condition, a red light at any crosswalk for roads over 35 miles an hour. The challenge with this is that it means we would have to remove a lot of these flashing beacons that are already in place. And when you look at the actual numbers from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the rapid flashing beacons actually do reduce crashes in crosswalks. So they're not perfect, but if you're not in a situation where you can put up a red light, and red lights don't make sense everywhere, the rapid flashing beacon does enhance safety for pedestrians. So we would suggest that we continue to bring that issue forward to the to our legislative delegation and let them know what the real numbers are. We have also, in part urged by our school transportation working group, but carrying that forward, supported raising the standards for determining school hazardous walking conditions, and urged the state to continue to share that cost burden of the required school bus service. So that's a couple of the highlights. Joshua, could you scroll down to the next page? So this next letter was specifically about the rapid flashing beacons. And then after that, I wanted to share with you our discussions about funding for transit service. So how flexible are state dollars in being able to allocate dollars to transit service as opposed to widening highways, for example? This is a topic for most of the major metro areas in the state of Florida. And so this past spring, we did sign a letter in coordination with a couple of the other MPOs urging greater flexibility in use of toll revenues for express bus service. We also, and Joshua, if you could scroll down one more time, since that time, we've been having a lot of discussions about what does it mean when there are earmarks in the state budget for transit investments. It's become super clear as we've talked with DOT District 7 over the last year that they don't get additional funds when there's a state budget earmark. What it means is that there's a requirement to spend the funds that they get on particular things. So in the fiscal 20 budget, there were 2 earmarks for TBARDA that wound up affecting funding for HART and for PSTA. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but our transit agencies are definitely making every dollar count right now. So, you know, was that the most appropriate use of the state dollars? You know, when they were going to, HART was going to spend them on maintenance facility improvements, and PSTA was going to improve their express bus service that connects St. Petersburg to Tampa. So we've had a real push this year to improve our communications to our legislative delegation and to all of our governmental agencies about what does it mean when there's a state budget earmarked for transit, and where do those dollars end up coming from. And I think that brings me to the end of my summary. Oh, excuse me. There are, of course, also some statements particularly about our Transportation Disadvantage Program, which of course is also a state program. And of course, you all have advocated year after year for rides, rides, rides. And we continue to take that message forward. We're very excited about the successes of the Tri-County program through USERV, that pilot program last year, and we're hopeful that the MCORS funding, that is new funding through the Florida Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged, that we'll be able to bring a share of that funding back to this Tri-County area to fund a continuation of that pilot program that adds more trips across county lines for our TD populations. And I think that's it. We have just this past week gotten some draft language from the Planning Commission, where they are looking to ask our legislative delegation for flexibility with virtual meetings, particularly for boards that are in an advisory role. So where the final decision is not being made by this group that meets in the sunshine, can we continue to hold virtual meetings and just count on that final decision being made at a meeting that has an in-person quorum? So that would apply obviously to this group, to the Transportation Disadvantage Board, would apply to the Planning Commission, to the other advisory committees of our MPO. So any other suggestions for things that we would want to bring to our legislators' attention this year?
This is Dr. Gordon again. Question? Yes? Okay. So thank you, Beth. I wasn't clear on what you were sharing on the school buses. Could you just clarify a little bit more the issue with the school buses, school bus transportation?
Sure. The state provides some funding to school districts for school bus service. It is not the full cost of the school bus service. This funding is made available for students that are outside of a 2-mile radius of the school. So the assumption is that students would be able to walk to school if they live within 2 miles of the school. The exception is if their route is considered to have a hazardous walking condition. And there are some very specific lists of what constitutes a hazardous walking condition. And that review and determination of a hazardous walking condition is done through like a field walkthrough with one of the county engineers, school district staff, and the MPO has also been participating in that. MPO staff has. So there are some places that have been declared hazardous walking conditions and where the state does provide some financial support for bus service for students to whom that applies. It's pretty limited. There's also been concern raised about 2 miles is a long way. And would we want to, potentially reduce that walking radius to 1.5 miles or 1 mile? The school district has actually prepared cost estimates of what that would mean in terms of increased busing costs. So there's a lot of, kind of background research into all of this, and we can definitely do a deeper dive with our legislators that want to get into detail on that. Right now, it's a challenge even to get it on the radar screen, quite frankly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a big issue here. We've had mothers and fathers sending us videos, putting video on our, sending video to the local TV stations of their children walking in literally in ditches along the sides of the roads that have no sidewalks or shoulders even. And the grass is grown high and there's trash in there and water. So there's some really deplorable conditions in which our school children are walking to school and
right now sidewalks are not required for a hazardous walking condition determination.
Incredible.
Or even on very, very busy roads, so it's a big problem. The county commission has been trying to address it as much as we can here, but it's such a big issue here. We do need to get that on our legislators' radar screen.
Yes, I agree. Yes, thank you.
Anyone else, a question or comment about legislative agenda? Do I see us then taking off the point about, I think if our transportation tax doesn't survive this trip through the Supreme Court, we're going to be considering putting something else on before the voters. And so I think it's still important to keep telling our legislators that. So I didn't see that bullet moved forward. Is that still on the draft?
So we don't have a draft letter at this point, but I would recommend bringing that forward in our new letter for this year. Yes.
Right. I think that, the push from the legislators to squash citizen initiatives is going to continue, but we are going to need some freedom in that regard if we're going to get a transportation tax passed after all, if we need to have take another stab at that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you very much. This is, really good. I think we've got some really good, clear items that matter here to send to them. Thanks for your work on this.
Thank you. And please feel free to contact me if you think of anything else that we should consider.
Great, great. We don't need to move any motions on these status reports, do we, Mr. Barber?
No, Commissioner. And
right.
Joe from FDOT is here if we want to give him some time to provide a quick update on crosswalks.
Sure. Welcome, Mr. Bugle. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And you're recognized to give us that status report on audible crosswalks.
Yes. Hey, good morning. Sorry, we've been doing some interviews this morning, trying to, bring on some new people and bring in some help. And I do want to share with you as much as I can as far as the way we do audible pedestrian crossings. And so, just a little bit about me in general is, I'm in charge of the arterials traffic systems, mainly the traffic signals. You know, we work with the local agencies for making sure that the signals are maintained on the state highways. And so we also deal with various requests that come in from the public and also from, you know, politicians and just anybody you can think of who has a question. And so with that, part of our constituency is the, you know, folks that need help with audible pedestrian buttons. And so typically what happens is evaluations are made when, you know, a request comes in, we evaluate it, and then we work with an orientation specialist from Lighthouse for the Blind. That's the primary organization that we work with. And they would reach out, we get them in contact with that individual, and then they help them kind of work through what it is that they need and what it is, you know, that they may need help with. In some cases, they need training on how the audible pedestrian devices work. And so once that evaluation specialist from Lighthouse from the Blind is able to work with them and make recommendations, they get back with us and let us know what they're, you know, they find out what the skills and abilities are of that individual. And then they would work back with us to produce the safest and most viable solution. So the three of us working together between Lighthouse and the Blind, the individual, and the FDOT on a case-by-case basis, because everybody's a little bit different, you know, have different situations going on. That's pretty much how it works. And then once they, you know, the individual and Lighthouse for the Blind has developed a solution, we're able to kind of help them implement that, working with the local agencies to do that. So first, one of the key items that they look for is where's the person coming from and where they're going, so that we can all determine the safest path. So they find out, you know, what direction they're coming from, where they're walking from, where they're heading to. And, you know, part of it is not just putting a button in a particular place, but also helping them find, you know, the safest path. They may not be taking the safest path. There may be a better option for them in that regard. We also take into account the noise level at the location and the requester's ability to hear and recognize traffic movements. So most importantly, the startup of traffic parallel to the crossing. Excuse me for the noise. Also the driver's visibility of pedestrians, because even though they are using audible pedestrian beacons, they may not have, they may not be fully blind. It seems like most people that we work with have some level of visibility, so that is taken into account as well. We also look at any conflicting movements with the pedestrian movement, like permissive left turns or right turn movements that are an issue, such as those controlled by a yield sign and not necessarily the traffic signal. We take into account traffic volumes available so as to hear and use the parallel traffic. We also try to identify any issues with the crosswalk path or the location of the proposed audible pedestrian push buttons. For example, if push buttons are placed on the same pole, we even more would like audibles for only one of the crosswalks. So, and they're also not recommended for two-stage crossing. We do not recommend audible flashing or audible buttons for two-stage crossings. And it's also addressed in the TEM. And I can reference that as well, but that's let's take a quick look. I'm pulling it up. I'm multitasking today, so forgive me, but it's under section 3.7 of the TEM. And so that directly defines all of the different procedures and processes that we use for you know, selecting, helping an individual select the flashing beacon. So I mean, that's the main thing, is that you know, we work with the Lighthouse for the Blind and then the individual to help select the best audible pedestrian features. So I hope that helps explain it as best I can in a quick kind of Cliff Notes way. and maybe I can help answer some questions, and that'll help clarify anything.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions before I open it up. What's the TEM?
Traffic Engineering Manual. It's a FDOT manual that we use to provide guidance on various traffic engineering solutions. Different. The LPI has a section, and the TEM, the flashing yellow arrows that you see out there for the permissive left turns, has a section. How we time traffic signals versus yellow and red clearance intervals. A lot of these types of nuanced type of details get for guidance and recommendations are all found in the traffic engineering the FDOT Traffic Engineering Manual, TEM.
Thank you. And what's a two-stage crosswalk?
Yes, ma'am. A two-stage crosswalk is when you have a longer road, a wider road, like a 6-lane road, and especially if you have left turn lanes, right turn lanes, a wide median. What we try to do is use the median to break up the crossing, where the pedestrian can cross into the median. Usually it's at least 6-foot wide median where they have some refuge space, and there'd be an additional pedestrian button there that allows them to cross the second, let's say the road is north-south, they would cross the northbound side to get to the median, and then there would be another, maybe a brief wait for them to cross the southbound side of the road, southbound direction travel of the road. And that helps. Basically what that does is it breaks up the crossing time, and this way they don't have to wait for an entire cycle length to go by before they can get the pedestrian call. It allows the pedestrian call to come up quicker, but it breaks up the time that they have to walk across the street. We do not recommend it for those, just because they would have to do more maneuvering in the middle and the median section, and trying to have someone do that has visual impairments. It's a much more difficult process.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments about the audible crosswalks?
And I do have some documentation that I can share with, I can follow it, reply to the meeting invite, make sure everybody has contact information for Lighthouse and from the blind. There's a few specific people that we work with directly, and for specific detail information on how that they actually work with them, and some of the processes and steps that they take when they have people that meet up with them and help them actually walk the roadway. They can give you a lot more specifics on their specific side of the process as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for joining us and helping us understand this important piece of helping people navigate our transportation avenues on foot. That takes us, thank you very much. That takes us to the number C, 2021 calendar. Mr. Barber.
Yes. Hello, board members. So we're setting up the monthly schedule of meetings for 2021. And we bring this to the board every year just to get comment and see if there's any major conflicts that anyone has with our meeting schedule for the upcoming year. So we will be meeting still, once again, bi-monthly on the fourth Friday of the month. You can see the meeting dates here. February is the 26th, April is the 23rd, June is the 25th, August is the 27th, October is the 22nd, December is the 10th. I just wanted to, once again, see if anyone had any objections, and if not, we can move forward with finalizing the monthly schedule of meetings for 2021.
Any questions or ideas or comments?
Conflicts, anyone?
Nope, seeing none. It looks like we're good to go with the every other monthly last Friday schedule.
Yep, wonderful.
Thank
I know
you.
we're getting close to our hour-and-a-half, Commissioner. I'm happy to run through the next status update quickly. I'll let you make that decision.
Yes, go. Yes, let's get it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mhm.
So thank you, board members. Good morning. Joshua Barber, MPO staff. I'm here to provide a quick update on our Title VI and non-discrimination plan, and I'm looking forward to hearing y'all's input on this. So a little bit of project background. The MPO adopted our last Title VI plan in 2018. The agency is required to regularly update our program by federal and state law, and every 3 years is considered best practice. The plan from 2018 covers the following areas. We identify underserved communities and where they're located. We work through how we engage those communities via review and what can be improved. We look at how we've incorporated equity into our past performance of plans and how we measure progress towards more equitable outcomes. We also look at internal agency procedures and processes, and the plan also makes recommendations for improving equity for the whole county. So as part of Plan Hillsborough's ongoing commitment to the community, our executive leadership has decided to expand our Title VI and non-discrimination plan to include both the Planning Commission and the MPO. So MPO staff and Planning Commission staff have been working pretty hard since deciding to move forward with this approach at identifying major project goals for this update. This isn't something we've ever done before as an agency, and there aren't really any examples nationwide of a joint non-discrimination plan between an MPO and a Planning Commission. So it was really important for us to identify goals for the project, which are here. So institutionalizing equity as a priority throughout all of our agencies, improving our data tracking and performance measurement of equity conditions and outcomes, improving our community engagement processes and strategies, and improving our community representation throughout our agency. And this is in addition to ensuring that we're meeting all of our federal and state requirements relating to civil rights legislation, such as Title VI. So the United States' major civil rights legislation states that we must not discriminate in the provision of any agency program and activities against the following groups. So race, ethnicity, color, and national origin are specifically mandated in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Non-discrimination against sex was included in the Highway Act of '73. Non-discrimination against persons with disabilities was included in the Rehabilitation Act of '73, as well as the ADA in 1990. And age was added as part of the Age Discrimination Act in 1975. There were subsequent executive orders on environmental justice, which included minority and low-income persons, and then another one on limited English proficiency that was passed in 2000. And in addition to these groups, we want to ensure that other further marginalized groups outside of these realms are not discriminated against in our programs and our policies. So the origin of civil rights legislation in the US, like I said, requires us to ensure non-discrimination in our programs. And it really started with the Civil Rights Act in 1964. And all the non-discrimination language in legislation has been modeled on Title VI, all the way up through the ADA. So this legislation has been really essential in preventing explicit discrimination in agency programs. And that was kind of manifested in this example here on the left, which shows the Homeowners Loan Corporation map from 1940, the infamous redlining maps. But unfortunately, you can see that while explicit discrimination has been outlawed, the legacy of historic discrimination continues to show itself in many ways. To the right, you can see racially concentrated areas of Tampa. Specifically African-American and Black population aligns really well with formerly redlined areas, as does low income. And similarly, on this map, you can see block groups with high rates of eviction levels also aligns well with formerly redlined areas of Tampa. And, you know, inequities continue to really show itself in so many ways in our society, especially between Black and white Americans in terms of home ownership, air quality, neighborhood safety, and transportation safety. And this is only one demographic group. This is only a snapshot. So similar disparities exist across other dimensions of diversity, such as disability and income. So these ongoing trends really show that non-discrimination is an important first step, but we must also contend with the legacy of past discrimination and seek to influence policy to have more equitable outcomes for those who continue to be underserved in our society. So to this end, our staff has developed a full project scope to advance more equitable outcomes for our agencies and you know, moving past strict legal compliance that's passed down from the federal level. One of our major tasks is developing a framework for equity and identifying an agency-wide definition. And another major task that's you know, above and beyond our federal requirements is looking at the history of the planning profession and decisions and policies that have been made locally to better understand the context of inequality in our county and try to you know, understand that past and recognize it's an essential component of solving the challenges of today. Other tasks include updating our community mapping process, looking at doing a review of what our agencies have been doing to advance equity to date. There will be a community engagement component to this as well in the form of focus groups and surveys. And ultimately, we'll be making recommendations for our agencies to help institutionalize equity throughout all of our plans and our processes. And ultimately, we'll be bringing this plan to our boards. We're consulting with Charles Brown of Rutgers University and Equitable Cities in this project, as well as local PR specialist Danielle Jackson of Tel Public Relations. You all can expect you know, this project to be going on through about July. We're doing a lot of foundational and background work right now and aiming for public involvement come February and March with adoption sometime in summer of 2021. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions or any comments or any input.
Joshua, this is Artie Fryer. I am happy to see that the work has begun with this. You've mentioned several areas that I think are extremely important, particularly the historical aspect that you're researching, because that brings us to where we are now. So would you mind periodically, I know you're in the process of the study, but periodically give us an update on where you are as we're moving to the conclusion of that? I think that would be helpful for us.
I'd be happy to.
Great idea. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, this is Dr. Gordon, and like Artie, I strongly support this effort. I like the idea of those 4 goals. I would just caution that goals are broad, and until you have related objectives, you don't really have a way of truly measuring whether you achieve those goals. So hopefully we'll, as you move along, see some of those objectives clearly laid out and your plans for measuring progress. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on the non-discrimination plan? Excellent work and so important. And I too am really informed by the historical research you're doing and agree with Dr. Gordon about making sure we have, you know, measurable goals. Good point. Okay, Are the old business and new business, do we have a Sunshine Line update?
Good morning, Madam Chair,
Hi.
board members, staff, and guests. Scott Clark, Director of Sunshine Line. I'd like to start off by introducing our newest member of our leadership team, Jerry Stickney. Jerry, if you could take a minute or two to introduce yourself and share some of your experience and what you bring to the team.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you. So my name is Jerry Stickney. I'm our Manager of Operations with Sunshine Line. And my background, I come from the Salvation Army Human Services world. Spent 9 years working with them. In the last few of those years as a state logistician for their disaster program, working within emergency management, and really having that tie to the community and helping in those aspects. And it's an amazing opportunity to be back to my home community and being able to make an impact within my community that I live. And I've been in Tampa for over 11 years and I absolutely love it. I've got my sisters that moved here. My brother just retired here. So I'm bringing the whole family down here to Tampa. So absolutely love it. And the opportunity to be with Sunshine Line. I've been with the county for a little over a year. I just transferred from our emergency management department. So I was serving as the deputy operations chief once I left. So transitioning and finding my home within the county, and Sunshine Line is a wonderful place, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to the future. So thanks for picking me, Scott.
You're welcome, Jerry, and thank you. And thank you, Karen, for that presentation. It was an excellent presentation. And so I'm going to give the board members a little bit of update of what Sunshine Line's been doing. And all I have to say is, wow, what a long, strange trip it's been. Ooh. So I'm going to go a little bit about pre-COVID, during COVID, and then maybe some post-COVID things. So pre-COVID, Sunshine Line, we were doing about 700 to 750 trips per day. And on Saturdays, we had a goal of 80 trips, and we met that goal. And one Saturday we exceeded it. We did over 100 trips. We were doing trips for aging services, adult daycare program, and for their congregate meals. We were doing group trips with about 30 senior housing facilities, plus a whole lot of other stuff. And we would also do summer field trips for New Life Village, which we weren't able to do this past summer. So during COVID, our trips dropped down to about 120 a day. Our Saturday, and that's mainly due to aging sites closed and no group trips. And then the shutdown. Our Saturday trips dropped down to about 20. Now we're back up to over 200 a day trips, and we're averaging about 68 on Saturdays. It's not a lot, but it's progress. Some of the actions we had to take during COVID, the first thing we had to do was develop a pandemic plan, and thank you, Karen, for that. She put that all together with our partners, the Health Department, Ryan Pedigo, Emergency Operations Center, Hillsborough County Risk Management, and some members from HART, Colin and Ivan. They helped us formulate that pandemic plan. Then we had to obtain all the supplies, the PPE and sanitation supplies for the drivers. We had to train the drivers on PPE, how to put it on properly, use it and wear it, and how to sanitize buses. You know, the drivers do a great job keeping the buses clean, but you're talking a pandemic, sanitation, that's a whole nother level. And they had to learn those new skills. Then we had to have our customers, we had to pre-screen them for COVID before booking the trips. Staff had to be screened. We implemented telecommuting. So our whole customer service section, which for decades was working in an office, they're now working from home, which is something I've been wanting to do for several years, just haven't had that opportunity or that mechanism in place through the county, but now it's a done deal and they're going to be permanently in that telecommuting status moving forward. Our drivers and passengers, they have to wear masks, social distancing on the bus. We started off with one passenger at a time during the peak of the pandemic. And since trips are increasing, we now increased it to 3 passengers on board. They're able to maintain their 6-foot distance and plus wearing the masks. And we had to talk with the health department to get that approved. Then one thing I wanted to do was the drivers, they're exposed, they're there every day. How do we protect them and their families? Yes, we have PPE and sanitation supplies. We have hand sanitizer dispensers on the vehicles. But one thing we did was reduce their exposure. How do we do that? We implemented a day of telecommuting. So the drivers typically never get to do extra training and things like that, like other county employees do, so web-based training and stuff like that, because they're always on the road. This was a great opportunity for them to telecommute and do online training. So they were all established with that, with Teams, lynda.com through the library, and we had staff develop a training curriculum and program for them. Then while that's going on, Aging Services had a need for meal delivery. So we started delivering hot dinner meals to their clients. And so the drivers who are telecommuting, the latter half of the day, they're delivering meals, so they're not exposed to passengers. So that's a whole day. That's reducing that by 50%. So since we started delivering hot meals in June, we've delivered over 8,000 hot meals to the seniors. The drivers had to go through food handling training and adult protective service reporting, because not only are they're not just dropping a meal off, they're actually seeing the client, maintaining their 6-foot distance, and just seeing how they're doing. And if there's anything out of the ordinary, they went through that training on how to report issues. A new project that we're working on is grocery delivery with Aging Services. So this is a partnership Aging is working on with GoGo Grandparents, where the seniors will call them. They'll call like Instacart or something like that, get their online deliveries. The issue was the drivers do not have the level 2 background checks like Sunshine Line drivers do. So they reached out to us, and that's something that we're working on right now. We'll go to the grocery store, pick up the groceries and deliver them. And not only will we just deliver them at the door and drop them off, a lot of them have significant needs. And our drivers will even go in, put the groceries in the kitchen, or even put them away depending on the individual's needs. So we're working on that right now. Some future post-COVID goals is to reestablish TD service to pre-COVID levels. We're already working on this with communications. Jerry and our customer service manager, Rosa, they've been working with communications. We've been in the news, I think, 2 times with videos, news releases. So what I'll do in the future, Josh, is when we have those news releases, I'll forward them to you so you can shoot them out to the board members. And we're also going to maintain higher levels of preparedness for future pandemics and all hazards, because this has been an unprecedented year with the COVID, with the social unrest, and also pertaining to that, our drivers went through additional training for situational awareness to help keep them out of those kind of situations, de-escalation training, and then the crazy hurricane season. So that's another reason why we're going to maintain higher levels of preparedness for all hazards. And then we're going to continue to determine and address the needs of the transportation disadvantaged, which we're doing right now. We're assessing our current clients, and we're doing the news releases to bring on new clientele to help increase our service levels. And that's pretty much all I have. Are there any questions for me?
Any questions or comments?
Scott, I think it's so wonderful that you all are planning to do grocery pickup and drop off. That's very innovative, and I'm very happy to hear it.
Thank you. Yeah, we have an amazing staff here. You know, they've endured a lot over the past several months, and they just keep on pushing. That's in their heart. They have a servant's heart, I have to say, and that's all our staff, and they're doing an amazing job. I just want to give kudos to all those guys, and that's why I wanted to present this to the board, so the board members know everything the employees are doing to help meet the needs of the community. So if any of the board members, if there's an organization that has neat transportation needs, you know, bring it to the table. It's something we can discuss, something we can work out.
Thank you. As Councilman Schisler said earlier, it's amazing what we're doing here, and we have a lot to be proud of, and it's a testament to your staff and our citizens. I think our community that we support. this kind of outreach and help for our disadvantaged citizens who need this. So thank you very much, and welcome to Mr. Sticky. Glad to see you enthusiastic about this area, which has been my home all my life, and I feel as enthusiastic as you do. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And with that, I think we're ready to look at the bylaws amendment.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I want to just combine these next two old business, new business items. So our next meeting is December 11th at 9:30. We're fully expecting the governor's sunshine law suspension executive order to expire, which is going to require us to have a quorum in person. So for this board, we have 19 members. A quorum is a simple majority, which will be 10 members in person. I know there was a lot of hesitation. The last time this was brought up at the end of September, right before the governor extended the executive order for 1 more month. And we had about 4 or 5 folks that were willing and able to attend in person. I definitely want everyone's safety at the top of the mind here. So we can move forward with our current quorum requirements, which will be 10 people. Or I would like to propose, if the board wants to, we can request that the MPO amend our board's bylaws to lower the quorum requirements so that we will not need 10 people in person. We could go down to something like 5. And if this were the case, we would need, of course, 5 people in person to meet quorum, but everyone attending online would still be able to vote. So I want to give you all some time to discuss that, if that's an interest. Yeah, we can talk about that.
I don't see any other comments. One thing that occurs to me is to ask, it's my understanding that the state law, requires a quorum in person if they don't change it. I think hopefully, we might, well, one hope is that they might approve the suggestion we talked about earlier in the meeting to allow virtual meetings for committees like ours that are advisory only and not the final decision maker. That would be one thing. I wonder if as we consider the amendment to the bylaws, if we have to define a quorum lower for, in order to meet the state law, we might still have a policy that, I wonder if we can get the lawyers to work on something that would be like a physical quorum is constituted by something like 5. But we have a policy of not taking action without 50% present in one way or another, virtual or physical. We'd have to ask the lawyers how to wordsmith something like that so that we still need a majority voting on any recommendations. Just food for thought.
It makes sense. And just on the advisory side, there are certain items that this board is required to approve as part of our grant requirements to the state. So while these don't come up every meeting, stuff like today, the CTC annual operating report must be approved by this board. So.
But I think we are getting used to dealing with each other virtually, and frankly, the more people get used to using their cameras so we can see each other's expressions as we talk, the more we can use that body language and facial expression to help us function as a group. Do we have a limit on that in the GoToMeeting format? A limit on that?
Sure. I don't think so, Madam Chair.
So if I could suggest, people, I understand that some people have to call in and are limited by what their technology is, but I really think the more we can see each other as we go through this time of virtual meetings, the better it is. I mean, yeah. So that's all I have. Is there anybody else with any thoughts on this? We'll just have to try to figure out how we can accommodate. You know, also on the Heart board, we were able to define what's an emergency. We have limited the number of meetings you can miss but attend virtually in our bylaws there, but we have defined it emergency exigent circumstances to include a global pandemic, you know, so that those limits don't apply. I don't know if our MPO or committee bylaws have anything like that, but while we're at it, you know, we would want to check and make sure that any virtual attendance is allowed under for health reasons, including a pandemic.
I can look into that, Madam Chair.
I don't think we have that here, but just in case while we're at it.
Yeah. So given that, you know, the quorum requirements in December will be 10. If the board is interested in requesting the MPO board amend those bylaws to reduce our quorum requirements, I would ask for a motion for that and a second and a vote, and we can move forward with that process. If not, then we'll need a 10-person quorum in person for our next meeting.
This is Dr. Gordon. I would move that the board consider reducing the quorum requirements to, as you recommended, 5.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Gordon.
you. Do I have a second?
Artie Fryer, I second.
Great. So I've got a motion by Dr. Gordon and second by Mr. Fryer. Is there any discussion about the motion? All right. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. Hearing none, let the record show that motion passed unanimously, and take that to the MPO board.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Is there any other old business or new business from the members or staff? Anything anyone wants to consider before we adjourn or bring up or announce? Going once, going twice, hearing none. I just would wish everybody a good weekend and stay safe, go Rays, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.